the first piece of legislation ever enacted by the Congress of the United States was to adopt the Declaration of Independence. And the Declaration of Independence, just as they signed it, just as they promulgated it on July 4th, 1776, is part of the law of the land. And so if anybody says to you, well, what do you do when the government violates our natural rights? You do what the law of the United States says you do. It is the duty of the people to alter or abolish a government that violates our rights. And so we wrote a Constitution, and the Constitution, because of the Bill of Rights, added specific guarantees of natural rights that the government couldn't interfere with. The right to think as you want, the right to say what you think, the right to develop your own personality. I've frequently told O'Reilly that's the right he should be most grateful for. The right to publish what you say, the right to worship as you want, the right not to worship if you don't want, the right to self-defense, the right to use a gun when the police are unwilling or unable to protect you, and the right to use that gun on the government if it steals our freedoms, if it's taken over by a tyrant. The most unique of American rights is articulated in the Fourth Amendment. And after the right to life, it is the greatest of rights. It is the right to be left alone. We call it the right to privacy. And it reversed the Writs of Assistance Act. And it said if the government has a target, someone from whom they want evidence, no matter how guilty is the target, no matter how widespread is the belief in the guilt of the target, no matter how accurate is the belief in the guilt of the target, when the government wants to get in your property or in your home or into your bank account or into your papers, it must go to a neutral judge. And it must present to that judge what the Constitution calls and what lawyers know as probable cause, evidence under oath that it is more likely than not that the target or the custodian of these papers possesses evidence of a crime. That was the law of the land in the United States of America until it slowly began being worn away in the lifetime of everyone in this room. Let's get this straight. The right to privacy, this unique American right, required that everyone from the government that wanted anything from a private person had to go to a neutral judge and swear an oath and present evidence to that judge as to why the person's right to privacy should be violated. Now, we all know what happened on 9/11. And many of you live right here. Shanksville, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., Lower Manhattan. None of those is more than a day's ride from here. Many of you probably know victims of 9/11. I did. A lot of us at Fox did. I happened to have been in New Jersey the morning when it happened, and we all have horrific memories, and it was one of the darkest days in American history. But my friends, assaults by fanatics on our safety does not justify assaults by the government on our freedom. The Bush administration went to the Congress and said we have to have the Patriot Act. And we need it right now because the terrorists are under every bedpost and behind every toilet and inside every refrigerator. And if we don't have these powers, we will not be kept safe. And so the Patriot Act, which is 315 pages long, which basically amends hundreds and hundreds of other statutes. So in order to read the Patriot Act, you not only need the act itself in front of you, you need the entire United States Code, which is about the size of 8 or 10 sets of Encyclopedia Britannica. I've read it 3 times, and it takes about 20 hours to read each time. The Patriot Act was posted on the House intranet, the internal internet, to which only members of the House of Representatives and their senior staff have access, for 15 minutes before the vote. There was no debate on the floor of the House, and the Patriot Act was enacted. There was a debate on the floor of the Senate. Only one senator conceded that he read it, Paul Wellstone, who's now dead, and he's one of the 2 who voted against it. A half dozen courageous members of the House of Representatives, like Ron Paul, said, "How the heck can you expect me to vote on something that you won't let me read?" The Patriot Act lets federal agents write their own search warrants. We have come 360 degrees from fighting a revolution against a tyrannical government because it dispatched its agents to write their own search warrants, to establishing a constitution which assured us that that would never happen and required that when the government wants anything from you, it has to go to a judge, to popularly electing members of Congress who would vote to gut the Constitution and remove the second most important right in it, and let federal agents write their own search warrants. And that's what this monstrosity of the so-called Patriot Act does. When I was giving a speech similar to this in another state in the Midwest, there were a lot of members of Congress there, about a half a dozen of whom came up to me afterwards and said, "We voted for the Patriot Act. We didn't know that it allowed agents to write their own search warrants. We never heard that before." Now, you then ask them a question. Lawyers like to ask questions that they already know the answer to. Question, did you read it? No, we didn't. Question, did you read anything before you voted on it? Answer, yes. Question, what did you read? We read a summary of it. Question, prepared by whom? By the Justice Department. Well, of course the Justice Department is not going to tell you the powers that you're giving to it, to make it the decider and it the person and entity that can violate privacy. So these sad, sorry people who took an oath to uphold the Constitution in their blindness and in their fear enacted legislation that would subvert the Constitution. And some of them said, well, you know, we did this because we trusted George W. Bush. Trusted him with what? We are a government of laws and not of men. We have a Constitution that divides power, that keeps the states sovereign, that requires checks and balances. We don't give this kind of power to any single human being. It was the states who created the federal government and not the other way around. And power given to the federal government can be taken back. So we have a government that claims that it will uphold the Constitution of the United States, but nevertheless, without even allowing members of Congress to read the documents that assault our basic liberties, violates that very oath. One time I was having a debate on air with one of my more irritable, irascible colleagues with an ego the size of the state of Pennsylvania. It might not even be big enough for him. I won't mention any names. And we were debating whether or not President Bush or any president could declare a human being an enemy combatant and lock them up and throw away the key and strip them of all of their rights. And I made the argument that you've heard me make now, which is that our rights are natural, and our rights can't be taken away by an act of the Congress or a command of the President, but only after a jury trial, after we've been convicted of violating somebody else's rights. And I said to this irritable colleague of mine, you only like this law, you only support the right of the President to do this because you trust him. What will you do, this was before the Democratic primaries, what will you do if Hillary becomes president and she declares you to be an enemy combatant? And he said to me, well, Judge, if Hillary becomes president and declares me an enemy combatant and ships me to Gitmo, would you come and visit me? And I looked at him and I said, Bill? No. Because she'll probably want to keep me there too. There's a member of the President's cabinet. She's the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. I frequently forget her last name. Janet, what's her name? Absolutely, positively no relation whatsoever. Issues a report saying that people that believe in Second Amendment rights and people who have been veterans returning from the wars, whether just or unjust, and people who question the power of the government, and people who believe in the right to life are dangerous extremists. And I said to my friends that I work with who are just as upset over this report as you are, well, she knows that I'm right to life, and she knows that I believe that the right to carry a gun is a natural right, and she knows that I question the power of the government. She knows that because she hears me say it on the air every day. But how does she know it about the average American? Because she inherited the powers that the Republican Congress gave to a Republican president. Because her agents can write their own search warrants and go to your doctor, your lawyer, your telephone company, your computer server, even the post office, and read your mail and look at your records without having to get a warrant from a judge. Because her agents can capture the keystrokes that you touch on your computer without having to go to a federal judge to get that power. Because your buddy George W. Bush and the Republicans gave the president that power, and now it's in the hands of somebody that they don't trust. Don't they even know basic history? Give that kind of power to any human being who you like, and it will be passed to someone who doesn't like you. That's why we have a Constitution. So that kind of power cannot be in the hands of one person. That's why we have checks and balances. That's why the states can nullify a law of the Congress that interferes with their sovereignty. Do you know that the Congress has used the Interstate Commerce Clause to make it a crime for you to speak the truth? If an FBI agent shows up at your house with a self-written search warrant, the agent will tell you, you may not tell anyone about this. You may not tell your spouse in the bedroom. You may not tell a priest in the confessional. You may not tell your lawyer in her or his office. You may not tell anyone in whom you confide. You can't even answer truthfully in a courtroom under oath whether or not you received one of these warrants without violating the Patriot Act. Well, in Bridgeport, Connecticut, 2 FBI agents showed up and delivered one of these handwritten search warrants to an 86-year-old librarian. She looked at them and said, "Who the hell are you and what the hell is this?" And she handed it to her 76-year-old assistant, whereupon they were arrested because she revealed to another human being that the FBI had come calling. They were indicted and they were tried. And your federal government attempted to put an 86-year-old librarian and her 76-year-old assistant in a federal prison for 5 years because they told people that federal agents came calling with a self-written search warrant. Do you really think you have the power to do that under the Constitution? Now, the words that I just articulated are not mine. They're the words of the very courageous federal judge to whom, fortunately for the defendants and unfortunately for the government, this case was assigned. Because after the jury was impaneled, the government decided to withdraw the charges. They somehow thought that they would lose the case. The judge was about to declare the Patriot Act unconstitutional. Now, you see how insidious the government is. If there's no case in front of a judge, then the judge loses the power to declare the law on which the case is based unconstitutional. So, fearing that this courageous federal judge in Bridgeport, Connecticut, would declare the law unconstitutional, not caring what it did to the life of the 86-year-old or the 76-year-old, not concerned with its oath to uphold the Constitution, it simply withdrew the case and went about serving self-written search warrants and telling people, if you tell anyone about it, we'll come after you because you spoke the truth. Now, these gatherings to which I am privileged to attend. Last Saturday, I spoke to 25,000 people in the pouring rain in Fort Worth, Texas, and a month before that, to about 10,000 people in Columbus, Ohio. These gatherings are more important than anything you can imagine, because in the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its maximum hour of danger. You are that generation. This is your role. Now is that time. Freedom must be defended from every assailant in every corner of this country, from outside the country, from inside the country, and especially from the government that wants to take it away from us. God bless you.